Welcome back to our Experienced Real Estate Partners Roundtable today. We've got some more great information to talk about. The real estate market is starting to heat up, and you guys have been out there in the field, so I can't wait to hear what has happened since we talked last week. What are y'all seeing in real estate right now?
Multiple offers again. We are
Yay.
seeing, absolutely, yeah. Good news for some,
Yay,
better
if you're a
better news for
seller.
others,
Yeah,
right,
right.
yeah. So it, really the biggest thing that I've noticed when we had these offers coming in is that it's really about the fine tuning of the offer as a buyer agent. It's really about separating yourself. It's about separating your position for your buyer. And it's coming up with the difference makers. And as the listing agent, it's really just taking it down to the smallest of details and really setting everything, just putting it all out there and see where the best benefit is going to be brought for the sellers. And sometimes it's tight. I mean, there are a lot of similarities in these offers, and there are very, very subtle differences.
I would
So,
agree.
so coming down to the most minute of details to be able to find what is the best benefit for that seller's circumstances. In this particular case, we have a seller whose the daughter is the one handling the transaction for parents who aren't actively involved, and she's commuting in from Kansas City every week to be able to help things happen. And so time is of the essence. The quicker we can move on, the better. The less liabilities for the seller, the better. It's really, and while on paper all the numbers look the same and some of those contingencies may not be there, it's really just dialing it all down to what matters most to them. So us being the educators to be able to dial it down, take time and walk them through all the subtle differences, it makes a world of difference, and it really leverages the best position for your sellers right now.
Have you seen like how many offers did you get total? And of those, which ones had escalation clauses?
So we started off with, we had an offer that tried to get everyone else shut out and gave us tried to submit early. So we got a secondary revision on that. So ultimately, we had 4 offers final, but 2 of those offers got completely revised and resubmitted.
With escalations or no?
They started with escalation, and the second one that won took the escalation out and just came in strong. And
that's better.
so at the end of the day, they were 3,000 beneath somebody else, but they absolutely stripped everything else out. The only thing she's doing is closing.
Wow.
And for this particular seller, it was really the difference maker. I mean, that's what she needed.
I think what you mentioned too, I think when they just completely revise without it, it creates us not to do a counter.
Right.
So it's even
Right.
better,
Right.
especially
Yeah.
too for the seller, they can just literally accept
Yeah.
and then.
Well, and for
Yes.
somebody they're not in this game, they don't know this arena, and then you get multiple offers with multiple
Yes.
escalations with varying increments, varying ceilings, and it's
Makes it
just a
confusing,
lot.
and you wanna
It's
make it easy.
absolutely a lot. And so we always put everything out on a spreadsheet that makes everything as apples to apples and clear cut as it can be. But even then, that's when you take a step back and you do the overview of all the offers, and you realize how much we have to sort through as agents in this business, especially in the multiple offer situation. And how scary it can be for a seller having to sort through all that stuff. So
And luckily, you've buyers agents that have sort of been through this before, and when those offers come in, they can educate their buyers on how this works. Look, we put this first offer in.
absolutely.
We need to peel a few things back if you really want this house.
Yeah, and it really boils down to 2. I mean, on the front end, when we have people submitting those offers, how many of those agents have done the upfront work of giving us a call, letting us know that it's coming, asking the questions up front before they submit the offer?
Right.
Because I know how I like to submit offers for a buyer, and if I can see people doing similar things on the front end, knowing that they're actively involved, that they really want the best for their people, and they want to make sure they see the best end for the transaction, okay, that speaks volumes. Because some of the offers that we received, we didn't have that. And
So let's take a few steps back though, because
Sure.
we're throwing around terms here and we're talking to consumers sometimes too.
yeah.
Escalation clause.
Yes, so an escalation clause, basically what that's saying is that we are willing to submit at this price. If there is another offer that comes in, we are willing to beat that offer by a certain dollar amount to a maximum sale price of whatever that amount is. So you've created a ceiling, and a step-up increment over any previous offer that you might receive from another buyer
Hence
agent.
your purchasing price escalating.
Yes,
which is what the
escalation,
term
right.
Comes from.
So basically when we have, so just to add to the confusion, when you have multiple offers that are all saying that, we had some offers that were stepping up by $1,000. We had other offers that were stepping up by as much as $5,000. So you have to pace all of those offers against one another. You have to see where their starting point is, where their ending point is.
Okay, so stop for a second.
Yes,
Because I had an agent in panic reach out to me
okay,
late at night this past week
Mm-hmm.
with multiple escalation clauses on their offer.
Mm-hmm.
And she just felt overwhelmed
sure.
with sorting through it and asked the question, how do I know which one's
Well, you got
escalating off
the other
of what?
contingencies, right?
Well, weighing the contingency, but her question was,
Mm-hmm.
let's just throw a simple thing out there. One offers 225 with an escalation of 1,000 over the highest offer up to whatever.
Right.
The other one is 237 with $1,000 over up to whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So is the 235 with $1,000 over on the 237 now a 238 offer?
Mhm.
Or is it 235 and 237? That's
Right.
where I think still there's some people out there,
Is it contingent on
They're
financing?
confused.
Is the financing piece on each part strong?
but that's not the price part of the escalation. So she was asking, what's my price? Am I calculating, like, is one escalating, the
Right.
other to absolutely the max?
Right.
And my answer was yes,
Mm-hmm.
it is escalating to each of their max, and whoever
Mm-hmm.
maxed out the highest is your winning offer. But the problem is not every agent or consumer understands that
Mm-hmm.
sometimes. So my suggestion was call the other agent back and say, listen, we're gonna go with your offer, but just to make sure we're on the same page.
Mm-hmm.
My other offer is blah, 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 and we're calculating yours at blank.
Right.
Before you go turn that other offer away, and these people freaking out and go, wow, wait a minute.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's not what your offer was low. Like, just don't even go there, because there's so much confusion.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's why
Right.
you're starting to see agents put in there, and consumers might see this in remarks of no escalating clauses,
Yep.
I agree.
which I don't
like it.
agree with,
I don't like
honestly.
it. I know.
We don't love them just because it causes confusion. But the escalating clauses is what is getting the consumer the highest.
Right.
It-
Done.
Yeah, and we have to stop and ask that question. Do we not want the escalation clause in there because it's harder for us? Or do we
Yes,
not want it
I
in there
think
because,
that's-
and I think that's it.
that's a big
I
portion
think it's a matter of
why.
convenience and
They
I,
don't wanna tax
It's
their
not,
brain.
not every agent understands it, so everybody
Right.
Yes,
has a different perception of what that, escalation is or this.
Yeah.
So that's what's confusing, because one agent might think one thing, and
Right.
then if
Right.
the other agent finds out, then it's like a whole
Right.
mess, and it's just way too confusing.
Yeah.
yes, it's
For
a mess.
everybody.
And so, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, the reason people do escalation clauses, I think, is because they don't want to maybe overbid.
Too much,
Yep.
yeah,
If
if there's
they
nobody else
don't
interested.
Right.
Don't need to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
So,
So you're kind of hedging your bet
Yeah.
of like,
I
I would pay this
but I don't
if
want to, yeah.
all these other people want it too.
right,
But if I make this offer and nobody else made an offer, I kind of feel like a fool
right.
for paying this much.
And I've had that conversation with sellers that have run on both sides. They're like, well, if they're willing to go up to that, why don't they just offer that right out of the gate?
So as we said earlier, this is an option that I've done too, is when you do start escalating and getting to a point, there is nothing that says you can't go back and counter the escalating offer with the price that you want or you feel like they're willing to go to or you're wanting them to go to
Yeah.
and say remove the escalating language. Now, sometimes they balk at that because they're like, they want to see that other contract. But
Yeah.
you know,
and
you can say, listen, this is what
Right.
you are willing to pay. We had some other offers. We don't want to deal with the escalation language. Our counter offer is your price minus all the escalation language. take it or leave it.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they'll take it because they've showed their cards, and that's the problem with escalating.
Yeah,
Right.
we
Now
already
they know where you're
we know
willing to
where
go.
you are, we know
Showing
where
your
your
cards,
ceiling is
right?
now, yeah.
Well, and
The
that's how,
seller's showing your cards.
that's exactly how this agent, this particular buyer won the offers, because when they resubmitted and made adjustments, they removed all escalation, they just went to their maximum, and they removed
And it
everything
just-
else.
yeah.
And they just took it straight to close.
Okay.
And so for this particular seller's circumstances, that was absolutely, it wasn't even the highest offer. So that's another thing. I mean, as agents, we need to walk our listing clients through, because we know their circumstances better than anybody else,
The other part is, are they willing to gap the appraisal on
Right.
that?
right? And they stripped out everything. There's no appraisal, there's no inspections, there's no anything. And for her, it was the best of all circumstances that fit for them.
The other
So,
piece that we didn't touch on though with the escalating clauses, the escalating language typically says you gotta produce the other contract
Yep.
that escalated yours.
Right.
Right. So that's why there are some states that don't allow escalating to happen.
Right.
So you hear people, oh, it's illegal, it's wrong. There are states that don't allow that because of their particular statutes on privacy for the other offer that presented, because that is their personal, now you can redact their names and everything, but there's states that the way that their statutes are written, that any type of information about someone else's offer without their permission is a violation of state law.
Yeah.
So that's why you hear that.
Yeah.
And then back to what Curtis, you were hitting on earlier, is price and all that is one thing for realtors. But then when you've got all these escalating, let's say we kind of figured out which ones are our best prices, then it goes back to what are the other terms involved?
I think so.
Because you can have a really, really great price, like 10,000 more
right.
than somebody else, but you've got some contingencies in there that the other ones don't have. So you have to weigh those out in value of a more for sure deal versus here's a lot more money I'm gonna offer you, but there's a lot more risk before I hand that money to you.
Yeah, let me attach these strings right here.
There's some
but-
strings attached. And what I started seeing as the gal who gets to review a bunch of offers that come in over the last years, is that after, when we first kind of went through the first year of craziness and the first year of all these multiple offers coming in, and then people started losing out, then it started getting like gamified a little bit. They started to figure out, oh, how can I kind of trick the person into making my offer look the best? I mean, sometimes it wasn't intentional, sometimes it absolutely was intentional because it's strategy too on the buy side. So what we started seeing occasionally, thank God not a ton, but occasionally you'd have this crazy high offer. Everybody else kind of coming in high around the same prices, then you had like this outlier. And the outliers always made me nervous because I watched the percentage of the outliers fall out.
Yeah.
Or try to come back and renegotiate
Yeah.
because they learned, from me taking a step back and analyzing, they learned what they were doing before when they were coming in with everybody else wasn't
It's
working.
Yeah.
So now they're gonna throw the big money at the seller to get that foot inside the door and get the door to close. Now they're in there. Now they're in with that seller. They've pushed everybody else away at this point. And then they go back and go, let me do my building inspection. Actually, I
Also,
want a
who's-
$30,000 credit for those 8 items that
Yeah.
came up on the building inspection that would cost $5,000.
Who's got more skin in the game? Put 10,000 earnest down, and somebody else is putting 5,000 down on a $500,000, $500,000 house.
Right.
I mean, who's got more skin?
Yeah, and a lot of times the thing that I was seeing too is the buyers who were putting those excessively high sale prices on, now all of a sudden there's a little bit of privilege for them attached to it because, well, I'm going this far
100%.
over.
Yes, of course.
Why wouldn't I
But
be able
it's
to
like,
get
we
this?
didn't
course.
have you go that
Yeah.
Yeah.
over. Like,
Yeah.
that's not our seller's
Yeah.
fault. Like,
Yeah.
that's your decision.
Yeah, that was your conversation with your buyer that you submitted that offer on behalf of.
Yep.
So now those are the choices that you made. That doesn't affect the way that our seller necessarily has to respond.
Exactly.
But there is.
And I want to touch on, because I know when I was out one week, you guys talked about earnest money a little bit.
Yes.
But Curtis, you just brought it back up again. And I don't know that we drilled down as far as to what I'm going to say during
Okay.
that earnest money conversation. But the highest earnest money is money that the buyer's coming out of pocket to let a title company hold an escrow until closing, and it applies towards your down
Closing,
payment,
yep.
or your closing costs, whatever. But there's a lot of confusion about earnest money, even within the industry. So you can, it is more attractive to a seller to see a bigger amount of money that you're taking out of your bank account and putting it into a third-party position, right? So it can help your offer look better. But your buyer, as a buyer, you need to know that can you live without that money for a while, even if this deal goes sideways? Because what people don't understand is there's no automatics with earnest money.
Right.
It's just not in the there's nothing in the contract that says automatic, hand you this money
Get it
back.
back.
So if you're in a position where you're taking two different stances with a seller and a buyer, and that money is sitting at that third party, that money's gonna stay at that third party until the two parties involved come to a resolution.
There's agreement.
Yeah. So just make sure when
So you
you're
need to be very
offering these big
comfortable.
bucks, be
Yeah.
comfortable that if you get under contract, now, if it doesn't go under contract, that's different.
Right.
Because they never consummated it.
Right.
But if that goes under contract and then for some ways goes sideways and somebody wants to be snarky about it and drag their feet with releasing, your money could be held up for a while.
Right.
So that's my only caution to buyers that put the big earnest money up. But does it
means
help to a
something.
seller?
It's not just
Right.
funny
Yeah,
money.
seller likes it.
Yeah.
Right.
But seller doesn't automatically get it either.
Right.
Okay, nobody gets it until there's a conclusion. So I just want to go back and circle over
Yeah.
that because I think there's a lot of confusion there on that. So Curtis, you touched on waiving appraisal contingencies or appraisal gaps. We talked, I don't know, did we talk about appraisals? I think we did last
Did
week.
a little bit last week.
Yeah.
So what are you guys seeing? Because when I first started seeing contracts rolling in January, I started seeing multiple offers.
Right.
But a lot of the contingencies were back on it. Building inspection contingencies were there,
Yep.
the finance contingencies there, the appraisal contingencies there. Are you seeing a change?
The offers that I had in this particular case were, you're not seeing a change? It was pretty clean, with the exception of one here or there. It didn't have the usual, no closing costs. There's usually, there were condo writers attached to two of them. One had an inspection writer attached to it, but that's the one who ended up stripping everything out. I haven't seen them,
See, they ultimately stripped it all out.
they did, they did. And,
So we're back to seeing,
Yes,
yeah,
I think so.
started competing on price.
So we're back to
Now we're
stripping.
back
Yeah.
to starting to
It's
compete.
like a pendulum there because for a buyer of mine, a cash buyer, we went 15 grand over list price, but we kept the inspection in there. So,
Yeah, there's a kind of
you know, I
way.
think
There's
it's
a little bit of a, yeah.
yeah. And on the buyer side, I mean, that's one of the conversations I have up front to see, I always want to know how much they're able to share because I want to know where I'm standing.
Oh, yeah.
I don't ask for specifics. I will, what kind of contingency am I competing against? Or do I need to keep them in? Are we stripping them out? And then the buyer can make that decision. We always let them know the risks associated to making those decisions. Just because there is always going to be some ramification to making that call.
Right.
But we need just to let them know what those look like. And
And an important note, it's important to have these conversations with your agent way ahead of time about these things.
Yeah.
What is
So
your
you're not in the
comfort
heat of the
level?
moment.
If
Yeah.
you walk into your dream house, what is your comfort level
Yeah.
today? Tell me today, so that we're not having to explain all this to you in the heat of the moment,
right.
when you're trying, when we've got 3 hours to get an offer in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're not truly comprehending what I'm telling you, that you're potentially
You're calling the
risking.
lender and you're trying to call everybody.
Yeah, so
and-
that's
yeah,
why it's
yeah.
important that when we say, let's sit down and talk, let's have a consultation, that's really important so that we can talk through these type of scenarios.
Yeah.
So that you have a really good grasp of potentially what is the craziest thing we might need to do to win this offer and what's your comfort level in that. So when the time comes, we're just retouching on those things and you go, oh yeah, that's right, okay, yep, I got it. And then we can go, because that makes us feel more comfortable. It
Sure.
makes us nervous telling you
yeah,
things like advising you to waive inspections. That's like,
Yeah.
yeah,
advising you to waive
Waive.
appraisals.
yeah,
Waive financing.
yeah,
You know,
Yeah.
but if you're comfortable with it and that's what you're willing to do to win a house, then we just need to make sure we're on the same page that you fully comprehend
What
what is
that really
about to
means.
happen.
And we're doing them an injustice if we don't bring that to their attention, that you were capable of removing this, or you were capable
Correct.
of removing that, and then they come back later and they're like, oh, we didn't know that. We
Right.
lost this because
Exactly.
Right.
we didn't have that option.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's 100% right. That's a really great point, because a lot of times we're used to, our job is the hero and the protector to put all these layers on. Like that's what we did for, I did
Most
for
of the
almost 20
time,
years,
yeah.
right? With the market until recently. Now it's like, what can we do? How much can we put you at risk to win your house?
Yeah.
Right.
You know,
Right,
to
right,
make
right.
us offer.
It feels, yeah, it
It's
feels
it's
uncomfortable
weird.
for all of
Yeah.
us, for
For
the
us.
lender too, and I appreciate you all so much too, because that conversation gets opened up with me as a lender all the time when contracts are getting written, hey, Lauren, could we go non-contingent on financing? It's like,
Yeah.
well, yes, but as long as everyone's aware that this doesn't mean that it's clear to close,
Right.
at this stage, but yeah.
So let's
It's a
touch on
concern.
one more
Yeah.
thing.
Sure.
While we're talking about stripping contingencies, and that was something we were talking about earlier before we sat at the table, is what a lot of agents are doing right now is saying, my buyer's gonna do an inspection for informational purposes only.
Yeah.
You're writing that into a prefabbed contract that has other legal language.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the problem that people are running into is that unless you modify by removing, by saying we're gonna strike some parts of this contract out, and
Yeah.
everybody agrees that this is no longer part of that contract, unless you're doing that along with that language, you're contradicting yourself within the contract.
Right.
And when there's not clarity, it's confusion, and it's all fine and great when everything's going along smoothly, but as soon as something changes and somebody wants to
To read that and be like.
get
"Wait
out
a
of that
second,"
contract
yeah.
or redo something or decide, well, I didn't realize there was this many things that was gonna be wrong with the house when I said I wouldn't have the seller make any repairs and we were doing it for informational purposes only. That's when everybody goes haywire, because you've got,
Yeah.
to me, when you write it that way without modifying part of the other contract,
Right.
and then you come back, so I'm looking at it like a listing agent. I had 15 people make me offers, and I'm looking at prices and terms. And one of your terms that I liked was that you weren't gonna ask my seller to make any repairs, that's what my seller liked. And that you were only you wanted to do your inspections, so I respect that as a seller, that the buyer wants to do their inspections for your own information. But no matter what that says, the definition of for information purposes only means it's not to come back and ask me for repairs.
So
It's for
we
you
would
just to
probably
have
strip
knowledge.
that walkaway clause in that.
Well, we would strip the negotiation clause.
Right.
Or one of the two.
Right.
Usually not both, well, can,
Yeah.
but
Right.
the other side shouldn't let us.
Yeah.
But my point is, so many people have been doing it that way, that when something does come back on inspections, it causes a lot of animosity and confusion, and then fighting over what was the real definition of the contract.
Right.
Because really, if there's two things in your contract that completely contradict each other, which one trumps?
Right.
Well, that's where you can
So
also.
then that earnest money comes back in,
Right.
because now you're disagreeing. The
Yeah.
buyer says, no, I didn't know this was wrong with the house, so I want you to fix it. And the seller says, you said you weren't gonna ask me to fix
You're
anything.
not removing something from the contract, you're adding something
Well, the
to
listing
it.
agent should also explain like, hey, we can come back and say, what does this mean? And then say, are you gonna ask for repairs or not?
Right.
Put that in there, so
Right.
ask for clarity right away,
Yes.
right,
And
okay.
then-
Yes,
Yeah.
so as the seller and your agent, if that is the case, I would definitely visit
ask.
with your agent and say, should we maybe counter that part of the
Absolutely.
contract isn't in there
Before
anymore?
we get
I
into
mean,
a situation,
do.
yeah.
Agent should
Yeah.
know that, but not everybody,
Right.
a lot of people do not, unfortunately. And, as agents, we're not supposed to be rewriting contracts either, because then that's practicing law. So there's only so much we can do with changing the terms.
It's almost like there should be a toggle switch in contract. If
Yeah.
you click one thing, that doesn't
Goes
allow
away.
you to click the other
Yeah,
thing.
it starts automatically graying things out.
Right.
That would not apply.
Yes.
Like legal software.
It's almost like you'd
Yeah.
prefer a special sales contract if you were gonna take
Take
that
everything
piece
out,
of it.
right.
Yeah, if you're
Yeah.
gonna strip
Right.
everything, then clean up the contract.
But then they do the
Yeah.
special sales contract and add the paragraph.
And
Some
then-
they do
yeah.
sometimes.
Then you're
Yeah,
writing.
yeah, they
How
throw
is
the
that
special,
practicing
that's
law?
inspection writer on it, and I'm like,
Yes.
just write it on a residential sale contract.
Right.
Just trying to catch your attention.
Yeah, they get me all excited, and then the writer is sitting there, I see the box checked, and the writer's along. So,
So anybody else have any amazing secrets or tips for either sellers or buyers right now as we're entering into probably even more of a frenzy,
Well, you-
even with rates where they're at?
Yeah,
and
you
what
can
I'm
always
seeing with
utilize
rates.
our cash offer, which is that
Yes.
NAF cash, New American Funding Cash. It's always a way to go in as a cash buyer, and you can kind of cut through some of this confusion.
And you don't have
good.
to sell your
Yeah.
house first that way.
You
You
do
can
not have
tap
to sell
into
your
the
house
equity of
first.
your
Yep.
home without getting a quote bridge loan.
Yeah, no bridge loan.
It's
It's,
not
it's
that.
kind of a true buy now, sell later.
Don't have to add a
type.
contingency to
Yeah,
it.
even if you need to sell your home for your debt to income or for the funds to close, you don't have to. Just let
Yeah.
Uncle Naff buy the house
Uncle
and
Nat.
then he'll sell it
We
right
only
back to
one.
you. Yes. So
Yes.
it does help with some of this stuff. It is there's a little bit of legwork on the front end that, the agent and I would coach you through and the NAF team, but it can be worth it to win. You win.
Next roundtable, we'll get a little deeper into
Yeah.
insurance clauses, because that's a whole other hot topic that a lot of people seem to not even
Forget about it.
realize is in the contract.
Yeah.
But be thinking about that now, sellers and buyers, like it's spring, we're gonna have storms, and if you
Yeah.
live in St. Louis, we've already
Here we
probably
go.
had 5 different
Random
hailstorms
floods
since
in
your
random
roof was
places.
replaced.
Yep.
So just think about the buyer's ability to get insurance if you've accepted a claim
Yeah.
on your house and didn't make repairs, that could hurt you when you go to sell. So just be thinking about those things, and then we'll get a little deeper into that topic on our next roundtable.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
All right, thank
Great.
you.